where those who perceive truth may strive to make others see.
A big, powerful America, and shoot them for what?
On that continent, we are trying to forge a new identity for which we need each other.
I want you to imagine that you're a parent and you get your kid a doll, and 2 years later, your kid is no longer playing with the doll, but it's around. And you get a call from someone who is blackmailing you with a recording of a private conversation that you had in your home with your family in front of that very same doll. Today we're going to be talking about privacy in the Renaissance, and this is going to be the second in this particular series, but I think I foresee more to come. Unfortunately, this is a topic that we're really faced with in terms of what's happening now, and what versus what should be happening, and how much is really needs to be brought to light regarding this subject and regarding how we move forward in general. And we're going to be referencing for this talk, we'll be referencing the Privacy Blueprint by Woodrow Hartzog, and one thing about this, I think we really need to understand is this is Woodrow is giving us his purpose is to kind of give us more of a blueprint, right? So he's more like, rather than kind of me reading a book and then kind of relaying like, hey, maybe this is how the Renaissance should look. He's very much action oriented in terms of how he's coming about this. And one thing that it's like I said, it's almost a joke nowadays in terms of how we kind of think about the like the agreements that we currently put ourselves in terms of like online. We're assaulted by agreements wherever we go on this online world, in this invisible world, and we rarely know what we're agreeing to. You could be giving away your firstborn child and you wouldn't even know it. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's crazy, but it's kind of it's the world we live in, right? And what's crazy about this is, I mean, it's kind of the Wild West, right? Because a lot of people don't necessarily think like, okay, this is something, there's such an incentive to get people to ignore what's happening than to get people to really, really pay attention to what's going on. And we navigate this space every day, and we really haven't caught up in terms of really any type of solid or reliable regulation on this area. And that is, of course, when we talk about overreach from the government is one thing, but in terms of the private industry, in terms of general hackers, like the introduction, when a lot of these things are around, they can be very, very much they can serve as kind of they can serve as censors for nefarious purposes when it comes down to what happens in the future, and in terms of nefarious people, trying to necessarily hackers trying to violate your privacy in the future, and it could definitely be something that we really really want to think about, or it's certain not certain this. It can be, and it more than can be. It is something that we really want to consider in terms of how we move forward in the future. Now, when it comes down to like this idea of an agreement and what's happening, it really made me like think about this paradigm of us entering into the online world and inserting ourselves into the online world, and how we kind of navigate and not really and have no real understanding about really what's going on in terms of our power in this space, or violations to that power in this space. I think we we can draw an analogy to really how a lot of people navigate society in general, right? So like how a lot of people will say, for instance, the concept of a proposal in general, like this is something that is like we can present proposals to representatives in various situations, but a lot of us don't know that, right? A lot of us don't really have that understanding of how to even create a proposal, but we do have that technically open to us, right? It makes me think about really just how that lack of incentive to really notify us about privacy is almost this. It's the same incentive to keep a lot of people ignorant to how that 30% out of that paycheck or 30 however much percentage of tax out of your paycheck, what the government does with that in terms of there's a tremendous incentive to keep you ignorant. And this is in terms of navigating this particular space, I think one of the most telling things, or one of really the most valuable things for me, was really understanding, kind of drawing that parallel and kind of creating the idea of what the Renaissance could be in this particular light of what Woodrow's proposing, right? And in terms of this particular book, of course, we're centered around technology and privacy, and when it comes down to the author, he's focused on particularly technology and privacy and what we can do. But he's advocating for really the design of technology rather than regulating the product itself, right? So, in terms of this paradigm shift, a lot of times we'll design regulation based on harm, not based on in terms of we're regulating an industry based on the harm that it's produced in the future, that it's produced, rather than regulating how an industry is actually constructed. And that's not an easy analogy. It's at first, but when you think about the idea of, for instance, when we think about more so the harm in terms of, or the harm that something could cause in terms of regulating based on how this product is designed, you'll get things like, for instance, like you'll start to let's see. I don't want to get too esoteric with you guys, but when it comes down to this world of online privacy, I think it kind of the language is more powerful here, right? Because it comes down to the world in which we cannot see, and when it comes down or we cannot see, but is very much real in terms of the consequences of ignoring such world, right? So, the idea of going into really the regulation of design, rather than being inundated with agreements, right, contracts, having something very much apparent. So think about emojis that kind of let a person know of what this particular product is, right? So that lock emoji, for instance, when that lock emoji is is kind of displayed, you assume that some form of security is you have some form of security. I'm not sure, depending on the context, right? So that is what we really, really want to kind of think about in terms of not this idea of the agreement. It's kind of serving more so as a shield for the corporation or the entities, rather than actually resulting in you navigating the space based on whatever potential problems that could arise, or the actual agreement in terms of the lack of privacy that you may have, right? So there's a tendency that these particular agreements are more so just hold harmless clauses for these guys in these industries, and it's going to, it hurts in so many different ways. I think when it comes down to it makes me think about Brian Tao in terms of this idea of how we navigate a space, but we don't really have an understanding of that particular space, in particular like an app that we download, right? So we don't really have a concept, or we don't really have a deep understanding, and the majority of us don't have a deep understanding of how that app is, what that app is doing and what that app can do, right? So we have back before the age of where cell phones were made available to everybody, this was something that we sent secret agents into a field with, right? So this idea of how much data we can pick up from a phone being analogous to what we sent like secret agents in the field with, right? So the idea of the capability that comes with this particular phone is tremendous, but we really don't have an understanding of. There's an ignorance that's ubiquitous throughout society about what this cell phone can do and what it is doing. Now, when it comes down to Woodrow, he points out like several examples, right? And we do this like in terms of products. I remember like this idea of regulating how products are sold and things about that to come into play, because at some point he brings into the conversation how you can't put a chainsaw up without kind of or with a warning notice that elicits an accurate emotional response to that person in terms of the harm that chainsaw can cause if you don't know how to operate a chainsaw. We don't really, in terms of that particular, the response we don't have that in terms of we don't have that for a lot of these apps, and these apps that we download. And if we did, then it's very much I would assume that these apps become less valuable to the people that make them, in terms of because the idea is there's a tremendous market for data right now, and they're able to essentially, like, when it comes down to, like, for instance, with free apps, the only reason that it's free is because you're the product, and that is we need to understand that. And the truth is it won't be as these apps will get a lot less valuable to these people the more that people learn about kind of the free-for-all that's really going on in this space, in this online world right now. Now, another example is the idea of controlling design. The Department of Transportation, for instance, they control how highways are built, right? The standards for highways are built, how they're used, what goes on there, right? And the incentive is the incentive for, like, to kind of prevent harm from occurring is so strong to where they pay attention to this element of what happens in reality in terms of how these things are treated, and integrating that into the actual design of a highway itself, right? So that is very much something that a lot of us really need to understand, or how it can be used, right? So, like, and how there's so much that goes into, like, roadways and highways and things of that nature. I think, like, I want to say, like, the limiting design parameter for highways are whether tanks can roll on them, and this is something that is something that is going to really help people understand just how intelligent we can get in terms of these industries in general. And when it comes down to the online space, it simply needs to be like that in terms of, I think there is definitely a degree of education that needs to come into place, but also most certainly a higher degree of regulation that needs to take place as well. I want to say, like, that book with Brian Tao, he wrote a book about privacy too in the first video. When it comes down to, I think this is 2024, when it came down to, like, I think really trying to highlight or expose Trump in some particular instance, that they stopped at some point because agencies did not want to simply basically show their hand in terms of how much information that they can get from everyday applications. And that was very, very telling, because it's just like, we really don't have a clue about how far we're in terms of this particular how in deep we are for a lot of these industries. And when it comes down to this book, Woodrow mentions at some point how experimenters were more likely to share information if a survey was in a more casual wording, right? So the idea of being able to, elicit a response based on, for instance, I think the survey, it was like a survey kind of written by your friend, right? So, like, the down and dirty sex secrets or something like that, and they were, like, more able to, like, get people to relay private information than they were if that same survey had like a more formal name, and the more formal name was like, oh, okay, well, this is, gonna teach us about, or some kind of like educational purpose, right? So they were able to design the survey to get to get more out of the people in that particular regard, right? So it's hard to, like, you don't realize just how easy it is to get to trick people in this particular space, but there is tremendous incentive in terms of what happens in that space, how that space can be used in the future. There's like these companies, they're going to attract the people who want to be highly effective in whatever they do. If they purpose these people to be highly effective in tricking the public, believe me, when it comes down to this idea of kind of the world of the online world in general, and how they could use that in terms of, they put these hold harmless agreements, but they trick you into giving them more information. It is very much something that we should keep our eye on. Not just keep our eye on, but very much raise the alarm about, in terms of because this stuff is already being done, right? We are in in a situation to where these companies are like easily able to attract people straight out of college into their company to do whatever they want, and or just attract people, period, in terms of to do what they want done. And the idea is, it seems like you think, like, you don't really have a clue about the amount of how ignorant, how like the difference in terms of these professionals versus you as these professionals creating and operating this platform than you do as a user. And it can get pretty extreme. And like I said, there's a tremendous incentive to make that even more extreme and to do even more with that. So now this idea of manipulating people and the market for manipulating people, I think we really have to see that as in terms of to really help you visualize that gap that's being created, that there is, like I said, tremendous incentive to keep us ignorant and to widen this gap in terms of make these people more knowledgeable and you less so. I'm thinking about, who said that? The military-industrial complex, in terms of the most harm, or the most in terms of the military-industrial complex, an informative populace is the only thing that can rein these guys in, and I do believe that. And when it comes down to this particular space in general, the online world, it's very much the same. Woodrow also brought up this idea of default settings and how they're a powerful tool for companies, because they skew how the results, right? So the chances of somebody going in and changing the default settings is very low. People, when it comes down to, like, for instance, you have to go in on X, formerly known as Twitter now, and you have to literally like go in and click off that you don't want your particular tweets to contribute to this AI system or to help the Grok AI, and or to contribute to kind of building the system. And it's on for I assume most people will have that on. They won't go in to turn that off, and that skew is a very real pressure that has a very real and direct result, as from someone simply saying, oh, this is what we're going to make the default settings. And that was very much something to think about as well. Woodrow also goes into this explanation about obscurity, right? So obscurity in terms of privacy. Think about when, for instance, like someone comes out of the shower and they need to like pass an open window, right? They're gonna move faster because they're gonna they're gonna assume that the speed in which they move and kind of the idea of someone watching, between the speed in which they move and the chances that someone is actually watching the window at that same exact time, they're gonna be able to, they're gonna be comfortable enough with that particular chance. And we lose that in terms of when we on these online spaces, because the idea is we navigate these spaces and we don't realize really the concept of losing obscurity in terms of, in that particular moment, imagine if someone could freeze frame and freeze frame. They have your every window under complete surveillance at every second of every day. They can freeze frame, and as you're moving across the window, this is where this is when you don't have obscurity, but you think you do. It's it can turn into it can turn into a complete mess, and we don't necessarily have that. We don't really have that understanding in terms of us not having obscurity online. And like people will say, a lot of people in my generation, I'm 33, and the idea of like people right now and how they treat people, we'll say, oh, these stupid kids are basically going on social media and they're telling on themselves, but we don't really have a concept of the amount of programming that is really inherent when it comes down to thinking about this current, this new generation. We need to think of them as a new species in terms of this idea of, I'm not sure where I've heard that, that I didn't really come up with that idea, but the idea of them being a new species. We don't really understand a lot of the pressures that created them. This new generation that's coming up now, and this idea of these guys being like kind of self-snitching on themselves to tell them, or whatever may happen online spaces. That concept of obscurity does not, or the lack of obscurity is not ingrained into a lot of these guys when they navigate social media. And I say a lot when it comes down to how the age of the internet and technology, or the age of the internet in general, I'd say they'd look back now. We're in our baby stages. We're kind of in the stage of infancy in terms of this age, because they'll look back, I believe, in say about 100 years, and they'll say we were simply the experiments to what kind of manifested out of this time period. And this is a tremendous portion of it, right? People aren't understanding of these concepts, specifically obscurity, and how that doesn't exist online, right? We assume that nobody's really paying attention to us, to where we have to worry about the idea of this being plastered everywhere, and we see it all the time. And and we're learning by bumping, like in terms of society, we're more so learning by just simply bumping our head as we go along, and it's cringeworthy to watch sometimes. It's just cringe to watch, like what's going on. But I mean, in terms of the people who kind of do understand, which would normally be like my generation, or more like or my generation, or before or a little after, we have to understand what happens in terms of that Department of Transportation, and how they kind of we have to create pressures that create that for the online space and the online world in general. Now, these ideas of kind of the Department of Transportation, this analogy of the Department of Transportation for the online space, this is kind of think of, we have to elicit emotional responses that are going to be kind of accurate in terms of, or that are going to accurately get the idea across, right? Because when it comes down to the English language, what we're doing, we can kind of see ourselves as kind of relaying information through words, right? And in terms of how that's done now, what's happening now, it seems like we need to create more powerful language or communication in terms of to get and elicit that emotional an accurate emotional response, in terms of not having so much of these people using social media in ways in which they use social media, or online spaces the way they use it, right? And when it comes down to this idea of information, and kind of how we really think of like the promotion of obscurity, really, or being more, or the promotion of really kind of getting obscurity out there is one thing, but also like understanding how these the packaging and the kind of availability of certain things affects how likely it is to run into problems, right? So, for instance, when it comes down to something with, like, I believe is a situation out in California where they were literally going to create an online chart for that listed people's incomes in a certain area or something like that, or for the elderly, or I forget what, but they were going to make it publicly available to search and find something. And this stuff was out there in terms of this is public information, but the way in which they packaged and made it valuable, it became something like, hey, we really don't want, like, an hacker could easily go to, or somebody could easily take advantage of this entire system if we package things like this. And that was something that, like, for instance, if you search online, you can't find a post on Facebook, you can't find a post on Instagram, right? You can't find you can't even, like, search for memes and things like that, because and that's on purpose. Like, we separate these particular things on purpose because we'd make it very easy for, we make it more easy in terms of, even though this stuff is publicly available, we don't want to make it, we don't make it to such to where this stuff can be, privacy can be easily, this we don't want to violate the principle of obscurity in these particular situations already. And this is something that is, it's important to acknowledge that, California got a lot of pushback from the people on, from the people on this particular idea of, oh, we're just going to make this list publicly available. And what's happening now, in terms of, and what's happening and then, and what's happened before, but we kind of still, we have to create that pressure, right? We have to be that informed populace that transforms and kind of creates this idea of a Department of Transportation for the online space, right? The idea that this idea of really selling things, we mentioned how the chainsaw and what goes into that. In terms of a renaissance in general, just to kind of give you guys more insight in terms of what I'm thinking, a Google Play Store, right? So what Brian Tao found in the first installment on this particular privacy series, Brian Tao found that Google Play Store didn't really have the safeguards in place, and I believe that really creating a new Play Store that's maybe more local to the people is going to be tremendous in terms of what can be done in those particular situations. And we should definitely be more, we can definitely create this idea and this concept around what, because privacy seems to have a real value nowadays. And a Play Store, probably like a subscription to this Play Store, all these apps that are made available, this can be something in terms of a way to kind of commercialize and sustain what's the idea of a renaissance in general. And I highly, if you're interested in that idea in general, please, be my guest to simply just do it on your own, but also we can kind of help create this system together in terms of something that is also replicable. And definitely, if when it comes down to this particular area, this particular idea, the financial incentive is second to really the idea of creating real change. So I really don't call me thinking that, or don't contact me thinking that this is going to be a conversation between me and you if you are in it if you don't have that in mind in terms of that particular hierarchy. And that's very I really don't want to disappoint people that are kind of under this idea that there's another incentive for this particular purpose. The idea of kind of the system, I think there's definitely room for financial gain, but if that is the primary incentive and the primary motive, and I'm not contacting you, then more than likely you won't gain by that particular there won't be anything to gain for you, for us working together in particular. Now, in terms of understanding, promoting understanding, this idea of really the lack of anonymity, the lack of anonymity, and what happens online. We do have to understand the give and take that takes place in terms of the online world. Naturally, when it comes down to anonymity, people are going to feel emboldened when they don't have to face consequences for their actions, and they're going to say things that they wouldn't say in real life, right? So that's kind of how a lot of people act now, or how a lot of people online act now in the comment section, right? Because the idea is nobody's going to find them, so they'll be safe to, this concept of a keyboard warrior, you're going to see a lot more of that when you don't have, when you do have anonymity, right? Behind, when you're able to hide behind a mask. And there's something to be said about that, but, also it's just there's a quote that I'm thinking of, you're more yourself when you're wearing a mask. And that is something also to play with, because it's just what's happening really. I think you do get an element of a person that you really may not see in a lot of situations. Very interesting. But also, Woodrow also mentions how this idea of trust is really defined as a willingness to be vulnerable, right? So he defines it as a willingness to be vulnerable. And that is very much interesting, because we started with kind of this idea of how this, the government also wants to keep people ignorant, and this analogy in general. People, it's kind of we're in a society where there's a significant dissonance, right? So we have, if I go out and I survey how many people trust the government versus how many people pay their taxes, that survey is going to highlight and really show people a tremendous difference in terms of what you say versus what you do, in the gap in action. And that is something that is, I think a lot of people need to think about that. I think a lot of people need to understand that, because it's stark when you really, really look at what happens. In terms of society, we do need a system that we can say we do trust, or a majority of us will trust. And I think that's, like I said, when it comes down to an informed populace, I think it's a tremendous start to that. Lessons for this particular idea in this renaissance. Technology should be used to bolster local communities, right? So the way in which kind of technology is designed now, I think the purpose of technology should be to further connect people in real life. And that is definitely something to where, to kind of how the Foundry was engineered in general. But and the Foundry is a kind of concept of a mixed-use development and a technological system in one. But it should be up on the Foundry actual, it should be up on the page. When it comes down to these idea of technology and creating that thought that kind of result in terms of a technology and all of this energy that we put into manipulating people, and we put that into kind of promoting, or when we put that purpose into getting people to, strengthen their own interactions in their surrounding communities, I think that is that's a tremendous shift and transformation that takes place, and we'll see a very different society. Two companies are incentivized to make people share information, right? So there is a market behind that. There is a very real economy behind designing a system or designing a platform where people are incentivized to share more information. That economy right now, I believe people do have an understanding of how off the rails we are, but and there is going to be an economy for that sustains the Renaissance through this idea of a Play Store in general, and I do believe that is something that we can really use. And these guys, in terms of what happens now, there's going to be challenges that we face in this idea of the Renaissance in general, but creating this platform or creating kind of this maybe this Play Store alternative. We need to kind of understand and really get the right people in place to design even this system to handle any type of resistance that we may come about. This idea of this Play Store alternative, and kind of what we're bringing about, or what we would bring about in this particular idea is applications and technologies that aren't predatory, but they're designed with these particular principles in mind. And I highly recommend Privacy Blueprint by Woodrow Hartzog, and it's definitely, I think that idea itself is going to be tremendous in terms of what we do here. Now, do all the YouTube podcast stuff, like the post. I was going to make a joke, but I don't want to get demonetized, or not demonetized, but have this reach less people as a result. But really think about, the systems that are going to be designed to take us into the future, right? So that adult from the baby age of the internet that we're in now, how does that look? What do we do? And how do we grow up into that? With that being said, hope to see you next time. Thank you.